today I'm here with my September book haul and TBR. Yes, that's right, from now on, or at least for the foreseeable future, I'm going to be combining book hauls and TBRs all in one video at the start of every month. The reason behind this is that recently when I did my updated bookshelf tour, I realised that I've read around 90% of books on my shelf, which I think is quite a good ratio of books read to books that I haven't read. And I definitely feel like I'm in the position to buy new books without feeling guilty. But I didn't want to buy 10 books all in one go, because for me, that's just not sustainable. Whenever I've done that in the past, I've read about 2 or 3 of them, and then all the others go to the back of my shelf, and I don't read them for months or even years. So it just didn't make sense to buy loads of books all in one go, and instead I want to buy books on a monthly basis as I read and review them. Essentially what will happen is that I will buy books at the start of every month, and the books that I buy are basically my TBR. This isn't a completely new idea to BookTube, so I'm not being completely original. I did used to see Priscilla from The Readables do this. She used to do monthly book hauls with monthly themes. She was one of my favourite booktubers back in the day who always really inspired me. She doesn't actually make booktube videos at the moment, but she started a new channel which is called From Sea to Stars, which is basically about graphic design. She works as a graphic designer and she does like studio vlogs which are super interesting. Even though I'm not a graphic designer myself, I just find it really fun to watch people being really creative and carrying out all these really interesting projects. So I'll link her new channel down below in the description in case you want to check her out and you didn't know where she went. I really like what Priscilla did with monthly themes, because she decided to basically read different genres each month in order to structure her reading, and that's definitely something that I'm going to try out. I don't know if it's going to work or if it's not going to work for me, but we're just going to see how it goes, and this is kind of an experiment, I suppose. So in terms of my monthly theme this month, it is inspired by back to school season. I know that a lot of people are going back to school, back to college, back to university. I've actually finished my education, so I'm going to be going into a full-time job as a social media executive at a digital agency in my city. But I thought that I would honour those people who are going back to school by reading books within this theme. In particular, I was thinking about what I really enjoyed studying when I was at school, when I was at university, and one of the main things was history. I always found it really interesting to learn about the past, particularly learning about the past in a more creative way through literature. So this month's theme is historical fiction. What I really love about historical fiction is the fact that it's usually very emotional, usually deals with very hard-hitting subjects, and it really gets you reflecting on the past and on different cultures as well. I really like the fact that historical fiction can educate people in a kind of creative way. So the first book that I've bought is the one that I am most excited about out of all of these books, and the book is The Labyrinth of the Spirits by Ruiz Zafón. This is the 4th book in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books series. If you've followed my channel for quite a while, you will know that I love The Shadow of the Wind, which is the 1st book in the series. It's one of my favourite books ever. The thing that I love about Ruiz Zafón is the storytelling. He's an excellent storyteller and he's just a master craftsman. He crafts stories in such a unique way. The stories are memorable, they're intense, they are emotional. You definitely go on an emotional roller coaster when you read a book by Ruiz Zafón. The Cemetery of Forgotten Books series starts with a character called Daniel Sempier, whose father works in a bookshop in the years following the Spanish Civil War. In line with tradition in the city of Barcelona, each year young people can go to a kind of massive library which is called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books, and they get to select one book that they can read and protect for the rest of their life. The character Daniel Sempier finds a book called The Shadow of the Wind, and he is completely compelled by this book. He loves it. It's one of the best books he's ever read, and he wants to read more books by the author who wrote it. But when he starts to look into buying new books by the author, he realises that there's someone out there burning and destroying all books by the author. So it kind of takes him on a mystery, and he learns about the backstory of this writer who wrote The Shadow of the Wind, and then about the person who is burning these books. I'm just going to read what it says on the back of this because I think it summarises the book in a really excellent way. As a child, Daniel St. Pierre discovered among the passageways of the Cemetery of Forgotten Books an extraordinary novel that would change the course of his life. Now a young man in the Barcelona of the late 1950s, Daniel runs the St. Pierre and Sons bookshop and enjoys a seemingly fulfilling life with his loving wife and son. Yet the mystery surrounding the death of his mother continues to plague his soul. Just when Daniel believes he is close to solving this enigma, a conspiracy more sinister than he could have imagined spreads its tentacles from the hellish Franco regime. That is when Yaa Gyasi appears. Born out of the nightmare of the war, she is the one who will lead Daniel to the edge of the abyss and reveal the secret history of his family. But at what terrifying price? I am honestly so excited to get around to this book. I really can't wait. I know it's a massive book. I think it's over 800 pages, which is the longest book in the series so far. Particularly because I studied Spanish at university and I learned a lot about Spanish history and Spanish culture. I feel like with this kind of book, I can really pick up on the nuances that Carlos Ruiz Zafón is referring to. But even if you don't know much about Spain, I honestly think this series is a great introduction to 20th century Spanish history. It's dark, it's gothic, it's horrifying, it's violent. I think it just captures the atmosphere of 20th century Spanish society really well. So I'm incredibly excited to get around to this book. It's definitely going to be the first book that I read this month because I just can't wait any longer. The second book that I've bought is actually a lot shorter and it is called Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I absolutely love this cover. The orange and the white and the red, just stunning really, like a really cool design. I think book covers are just really important. Like when I'm buying an edition of a book, I like to get a nice book cover. And this one just grabs me in even without reading the blurb. But let's talk about the blurb, and I'm just going to read it out so you have an idea of what the book's about. So it says, Effia and Essie, two sisters with two very different destinies. One sold into slavery, one a slave trader's wife. The consequences of their fate reverberate through the generations that follow. From the Gold Coast of Africa to the plantations of Mississippi, from the missionary schools of Ghana to the dive bars of Harlem. Spanning continents and generations, Yaa Gyasi has written a miraculous novel, an intense, heartbreaking story of one family and, through their lives, the story of America itself. This sounds really educational and really moving. I think particularly when you're looking at books dealing with slavery, they really get you thinking in a really deep and disturbing way about the history of the world, particularly the history of America and the transatlantic slave trade. When I was at university, I studied quite a lot about plantation slavery in the Caribbean islands, particularly the Spanish-speaking islands, so I already have a kind of foundational knowledge of slavery, but I don't know too much about it in Mississippi. I feel like it's going to be a really emotional and hard-hitting read. These kind of books are not easy, so even though it's quite a short book, I imagine that I'll have to take quite a lot of breaks just to kind of process what's going on. It's dark, it's disturbing, and that's absolutely what I expect and really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this book to have an emotional impact and to really hit me hard. According to some of the BookTube reviews that I've seen on this, the book is written from quite a lot of different perspectives and there's quite a lot of characters to follow, and sometimes the character development maybe isn't as strong as it could be, so that's one thing that I'm definitely going to pay attention to, because I think when a book's dealing with something like slavery, you really have to connect with the characters on an emotional level. Connecting with the characters is vital to emoting with the story and getting the most out of it. This one really intrigues me. I've actually wanted to buy it for quite a few years since it came out. Finally, I'm getting around to it as part of History Month. The next book is kind of similar in a way in that it deals with slavery once again, but it's by a different author and deals with something slightly different. It is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. According to what it says on the front of the book here, this was the winner of the Pulitzer Prize Fiction for 2017, and I have heard amazing things about this. It gets incredibly good reviews, so my expectations are super high. So I have to say one thing I don't like about this cover, it's got like a little flap and the cover doesn't go right to the end. So we have this like black piece of paper inside and the red cover doesn't go right to the edge, which really annoys me. I hate when books do this. I think I've only ever bought a few books like this, but in terms of the rest of the cover, really stunning design with the train tracks. Once again, I expect this is going to be a really emotional read. I think it's going to be difficult to read. I think I'll definitely have to pay a lot of attention, and I'm obviously looking for the emotional impact. So just in terms of what it's about, I'm going to read the back. Cora is a slave on a cotton plantation in Georgia, an existence made even more hellish by her status as an outcast among her fellow Africans, and she is approaching womanhood, where greater pain and danger awaits. So when Caesar, a slave recently arrived from Virginia, tells her about the Underground Railroad, Cora takes the momentous decision to accompany him on the escape to the north. In this razor-sharp novel, the Underground Railroad has assumed a physical form, a dilapidated boxcar pulled by a steam locomotive, picking up fugitives wherever it can. Thus begins Cora's perilous journey, as she is pursued by a ruthless slave catcher named Ridgway, obsessed both with Cora and her mother, who eluded him years before. The Underground Railroad is the story of one woman's ferocious will to escape the horrors of bondage, and a shatteringly powerful meditation on history and the unfulfilled promises of the present day. I was actually reading on Google what the Underground Railroad actually was, and it says that it was a network of secret routes and safe houses established in the United States during the early to mid-1800s, and it was used by African American slaves to escape into free states and Canada with the aid of abolitionists and allies who were sympathetic to their cause. So I'm really interested about how this historical phenomenon is represented in this book, and once again I'm looking for excellent characterization, because I think you really need to connect with characters when it's a book about slavery or similar themes which are dark and disturbing. The final book that I'd like to read in September is not actually one that I have bought specifically for this month. I've had it quite a while and I've mentioned it in a book haul before, but it's definitely going on my TBR if I manage to get through the other books, and it is Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie. This is a magical realist take on Indian independence from Britain in 1947. Born at the stroke of midnight at the exact moment of India's independence, Salim Sinai is a special child. However, this coincidence of birth has consequences he is not prepared for. Telepathic powers connect him with 1,000 other Midnight's children, all of whom are endowed with unusual gifts. Inextricably linked to his nation, Salim's story is a whirlwind of disasters and triumphs that mirrors the course of modern India at its most impossible and glorious. I've always been really interested in magical realist fiction, and particularly Latin American magical realism, which I studied as part of my university degree. Most of you know that my dissertation was on magical realism in the work of Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and I particularly focused on the political and the historical dimension of magical realism. Magical realism is a really interesting mode of fiction, particularly dealing with marginalised communities and histories that have often been silenced by the mainstream media. If I'm completely honest, this is the book that I'm most unsure about this month, and that's probably why I haven't read it before in the past. I've heard quite a lot of mixed reviews on this. Some people really love it, some people don't like it as much. I don't know if the magical realism elements will be easy to understand or whether they'll be confusing, but I think as long as the world building is really good, I should really enjoy this book. Again, it's going to be hard-hitting. That's probably the key word of historical fiction month. It's going to be thought-provoking and ultimately incredibly educational. Okay everyone, so these are they're going to fall over. These are the 4 books that I'm wanting to read in the month of September as part of Historical Fiction Month. I'm super excited about this theme, particularly the Labyrinth of the Spirits. I can't wait to get going with that one immediately after I finish filming this video. I'm also really excited for Homegoing and the Underground Railroad in regards to the theme of slavery, and then Midnight's Children is going to be really great in terms of its magical realist elements and post-colonial themes. Definitely let me know down below in the comments if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, or maybe if you're planning to read them in the future. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these books, because they do sound really interesting books, and I'm so excited to do individual book review videos on all of them. They just sound really impacting. I think they're going to have such an impact on me. They sound amazing, so thank you so much for watching. I'm going to stop saying amazing and exciting and hard-hitting, because I've probably said those adjectives about 50 times in the video. I might actually count to find out how many times I have said those words. But until next time, let me know what you think about the books in the comments below, and I will see you all again in my next video.